Welcome to another Soccer Down Here 1v1. It's part of our What's Next series, and the What's Next series has a lot of different layers to it now in this game, and can't think of somebody better to talk about all the different layers of the game than Rod Underwood. Rod, I met Rod, we were trying to establish this before we started, about 14 years ago. At the Soccer in the Streets office in Atlanta, Georgia. And since then, Rod has been in different countries, all over the CONCACAF region coaching, at the youth side, on the academy side, on the college side, on all levels of the pro game. And Rod has such a great background to help us out with some of the what's next, some of the answers of what's next across the board. Rod, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's get into this a little bit. So when I met you, you were in Atlanta, and you knew my colleague Ricardo Montoya at Soccer in the Streets on the youth side. You were also an assistant coach at Georgia State. Then you went to Portland, and you were with the Timbers in their USL days. How rewarding is it for you to see what's happened in Portland, from your time there to now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really big because first off, I have twins I have 4 kids, but my twins are 8. They were born in Portland. And my oldest daughter graduated from high school there and went to college in Oregon. And I still have people I consider lifelong friends that live in Oregon. And, the organization of the Timbers was very good to me. Gavin, I consider a friend, my kids and their kids are friends. It's just you look back on it, it's just a fun time. And just to see that where Portland is now and how they are such, a big club in U.S. soccer terms and an important club in U.S. soccer terms. And to say I was a part of that is really pleasing.
It was a vital time for the Timbers as they were really starting to prepare a few years down the road for joining MLS. But that was also a time for the United Soccer Leagues that they had kind of had a lot of things come together, and it was right before the North American Soccer League broke away. Your time in the USL and before that the USISL was really interesting to me. You were with the New Mexico Chiles, the Albuquerque Geckos, the South Carolina Shamrocks in days when I was working for the Atlanta Ruckus in the A-League at the time.
Okay.
The Geckos are a fascinating one to me because I don't know if everybody knows this. They were the last time the USISL had a promotion system. The Geckos were the team that got promoted. You won the division below the A-League and then got promoted into the A-League. It's come a long way since then, huh?
Yeah, no question. I mean, really, how I even got to New Mexico is quite interesting because I had never really been out. I think I'd been to Phoenix maybe once in my life. So that's the only time I really been out to like the Southwest, right? There's a guy by the name of Dave Carr who was who I think he was the coach at Marshall University when I was playing at Furman. Mm-hmm. So we had played against Marshall and he invited me out to Albuquerque in 1990. So, we're talking a long time ago, right? 1990. Said we're starting a team. And the funny thing was I was just finishing or about to graduate from Furman because I was training with the Atlanta Attack, right? The indoor team. So, and Dave Carr called and says, myself and another good college mate of mine, Ozzie and Roberts, we both went out and we signed our, first professional contract for pennies. And, the rest is history. Did well, made a lot of friends, met a lot of people. And then I kind of bounced a bit. I went to New Orleans and played a little bit of soccer in New Orleans for the New Orleans Gamblers. Names that you guys would know would be Mike Jeffries was there. He was on the team. Del Shore, these are guys that are, been around MLS, been around. So I played with those guys. Then I went back to Albuquerque and became the coach of New Mexico Chiles, this is a great story too, because I think it was 94, right around the World Cup time. 94, 95 is when I got the team. And we went on in 95. My first year, we went on to that sizzling 6 or 8 in Long Island. I think Long Island won the league at the time in the USL.
95, yeah. That was the year they had Tony Meola and Chris Armas and Giovanni Savarese right before MLS started.
Yeah, they hammered us too, by the way.
That team was stacked.
Yeah, we were a no money team. I mean, it's funny because the San Francisco area had a team, and Jeff Beitcher, all these guys that were early days of ML, Troy Dyack, all these guys were all on that team. Then you had Meola and those guys on that team, and then you had the Dynamo, which had all the the North Carolina guys, some guys that come up from Atlanta to play. We were just a ragtag team coming from Albuquerque, New Mexico, But that then, as the lower leagues changed, money went away, ownership changed, and then this group with Terry Fisher, a guy out of Dallas, I can't remember his name, but the name that might strike memory to you is Jean-Marie Pfaff, the goalkeeper. He was also an owner of that team.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was also an owner of that team, and they were actually. How it all came about, Terry Fisher had the rights, had all the rights to sell different products for the 1994 World Cup. And that time, and then I think that's when he met Jean-Marie, and Terry was a bigwig in USL and then I think all US Soccer. And so they were working on a movie for Jean-Marie Pfaff. And so he was looking at a way to get his name out a little bit in the U.S. as this movie was going to, go out worldwide. So anyway, we were loaded. I mean, to be fair, we were loaded. We had a very good team. We had a player that had come from Boca Juniors who had played with Diego Maradona. We had a New Zealand guy, Jason Batty, who went on to be San Jose's goalkeeper coach, and I think he's coaching one of the NWSL teams as a goalkeeper coach, and maybe Utah, maybe he's coaching that team. We had Bobby Clark's sons, Tommy Clark, Mike Stratty. I think Mike Stratty, Mike was one of those. He went on to be a Project 40 player. So I'm bringing up all these old things, right?
But that's so important because that's the era that I don't know if people necessarily appreciate it as much as they should, because this is that gap between the old North American Soccer League and everything that had kind of happened after it folded. You had different leagues popping up. You had things going. But once you got the World Cup coming to this country in 88 and preparing for 94, and you knew a league was going to come out of it, it was this kind of wild, wild west, but a lot of seeds were planted in a lot of places. And I think New Mexico is a prime example. Those teams, that era, it wasn't successful at the time, but I don't think New Mexico has the success that they did last year in the USL Championship if those seeds hadn't been planted when they were.
Yeah, I was looking at it, right? And so you bring a nice piece, right? So that 95, 96, 97, up until about, those first early, so probably from 90, even when MLS came the first year, USL was still, forging along. But if you start to look, right, if we look at MLS teams, right, teams that played in that era between 90 and 94, 95, there's an MLS team in San Jose. There was a team in the Bay Area in the league. There's two teams in LA. There was a team in LA. Then you go over to Columbus. There was a team in Columbus because we went and we played at Ohio State University, right? We played in the stadium that held 100,000 people. We played, I think they were called the Zogs or something like that. The Zogs. Right?
It's one of the worst names in American soccer history.
And I could just go down. I mean, I could go down and down and down the list. I mean, I think even with Chicago and I would say, and then I would say you had Tampa, Miami, they all had teams, and Miami's getting a team now. Tampa doesn't have a team, but they had a team. I would say of all the teams in the league right now, this is a guess, right? But it's probably worth looking up. I would say at least half of the MLS cities today at one point in time had a USISL team at one point in time.
Easily. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's vital. It's that just the seeds being planted. I mean, I've seen it here in Atlanta where I'll always remember the first game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We did a tailgate show out in the Gulch, and walking from the back of the Gulch to the stadium, I ran into so many people from just like my Atlanta soccer history. So, I mean, I ran into guys who played for the Ruckus when I worked there, guys who went on and played for the Silverbacks, people who were coaching at youth clubs, people I knew through soccer in the streets, people I'd played with in the leagues out at Silverbacks. I mean, just it felt like a homecoming. And that's what, I think all these teams now that we're starting to see that have success, it doesn't happen without that before. It just creates the fertile soil for it to take hold. It's got to be done the right way. And that's what we're starting to see some teams do really well with, and others still have work to do. But it doesn't happen at all without that history.
Right, exactly. I mean, that history is so vital. I just look at my own playing, right? And I just look back at the teams I liked, because growing up, I'm in my 50s, so growing up there wasn't much soccer on TV, but they had the Atlanta Chiefs, so I got a chance to see the Atlanta Chiefs play, and then the various teams come, and then on TV all I had was soccer made in Germany, and so that history sort of propelled me to continue on in the game because there was a much American soccer going on growing up, really, that you could grasp. And now, and that's really what's a positive in a lot of ways, is really what's, obviously Papadakis is from Atlanta, what he's done with the league since they took over and they bought the league, all the Nike stuff and all those different things. But without the lost money, without teams being on a shoestring budget, without people taking a chance on the game, we don't have MLS. We don't have it.
No,
it just wouldn't happen.
Not at all. There's no way it would have happened. There's no way it would have had the success that it did at the beginning because people were hungry for it, and also I think some of the wherewithal to survive because there hadn't been a league that had done that before. I mean, the North American Soccer League didn't last in all of its incarnations, and it went through quite a few. It didn't last as long throughout all of it as MLS has. And MLS isn't perfect by any stretch, but it's the best we've had, and it's changing kind of where we are. And that's what I want to get into with you, because as I look at your history, and I knew some of it and I didn't know all of it, how has soccer in the United States changed for you when you first started getting into the coaching side and you started to look at that bigger picture off the field? How has the game in this country changed?
It's changed dramatically because, to be fair, right? I mean, when I got into coaching really early, I got my A license by the time I was about, I think, 25 or 26. So
that's rare, yeah.
I got my A license pretty early. And then when MLS came about, I was still young enough to give it a go. So I must have been late 20s maybe. So, a lot of those guys, like, guys you see around coaching like Robin Fraser and those kind of guys, those guys are, Lawless. I mean, he's just turned 50. So those guys I'm a little bit older than those guys just by a few years. But I had to make a choice. I mean, at that time I was in Albuquerque and I was running camps, doing some youth coaching and coaching in the USISL. And I was just making way too much money just to go and try to make $10,000 or $12,000 a year and play in MLS. Now, if I look back on it, I wish I had taken that jump. Of course, yeah. But
right.
But at the time, I had a family, young family, couldn't afford to just go and make $10,000, $12,000. I wasn't going to be one of those guys that was going to be taken care of by U.S. Soccer and taken care of by the league and make some serious money. At that time, what was serious money at that time in the country. So I just really forged ahead in coaching. I mean, and it has been, I mean, it's had its ups and its downs, but it's been, overall, I feel like it's been a success. And it's just, the game is just so different, right? From the money, from the infrastructure, from the knowledge of the people running the offices, from the people on the fields on a daily basis, from the technical staff. It's just night and day. I mean, when I first got into coaching, I mean, I'm taking the balls home. I'm I'm bringing the cones, I'm bringing everything. We're traveling in vans. We're playing 2 to 3 games on a weekend. Per diem was, maybe 15 or $20 for the weekend. And you get to the rental car place, and the club's credit card is supposed to be taking care of everything, and there's no credit card, and then you put it on your card. It was just crazy, crazy times, man. But again, without those pioneers and those pioneers, because even like in '92, in 91, so in '90 we were in the APSL, whatever it was called, APSL something. It was East and West. It was like 30 teams, man, on the East Coast, West Coast. And then we had a very good owner, but then the teams got crazy. Well, if we're going to have a minimum budget, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And Albuquerque says, no, we're not going to spend that kind of money. So in '91, a bunch of the players got together and we formed the Player Soccer Corporation, which we were the owners of the team. And so basically, if we made any money, we all signed, and if we made any money, that's how we got paid, kind of thing. Those are just the things that not a lot of people know about, right? And the game is just evolved. It's evolved, the knowledge. I just can't. I mean, the knowledge, and obviously the soccer-specific stadiums, the stadiums, and the number of fans. Even when Atlanta's going to get a team, I'm like, man, you guys sure you want to put a team in Atlanta? Because, we've seen it left and right. But what Atlanta's done has just been phenomenal. But it's because Arthur Blank's money and the commitment and the drive to make sure that something is successful in the town that he loves. And sometimes that was missing. I think that people love their towns with these foundational teams in the USISL days. The pockets just weren't deep enough to maintain it, and it just made it constant chop and change all the time.
Yeah, that's such a key, and it's something that I've kind of kept coming back to as I try to explain what's happened here. And I think we're all still figuring it out. Maybe in 5-10 years down the road, we'll have a better understanding of the Atlanta effect on all of this. But it's for me, it's been because it's been taken seriously from day one, and you've got the perfect situation. You mentioned it. You had owners who were passionate before. You had to be, because there wasn't any money to be made in the late 90s, early 2000s. Nobody was getting rich off of owning a team or running a team or working in a team or coaching a team or playing for a team. Everybody was involved because they loved it. You didn't have the resources to take it to that next level, but then what we've seen here does ring true to me, in that you have to present things at a high level to get past our soccer bubble. Our soccer fans who are passionate, who are crazy like us, who are going to watch everything they can. You have to make it a big deal to get to that next step, to where you start to create new fans out of thin air. And that's something that we've seen here, and it's something that we haven't seen enough of in this country.
Yeah, I've been to different games, right? When I'm not coaching a team and you're in a stadium, right? And you're sitting around people, and even in the Pacific Northwest, up here where I am now, it's I would say most of the people who are sitting in the stands still aren't that knowledgeable. I talk about the Vancouver, the Seattle, the Portland, even though they're selling out and having all this great fan support, it's still an entertainment. These people become fans of the game. They don't necessarily know the game, but they become fans of the game. So these clubs have done a great job of, like you said, creating new fans, and they're coming because they choose to come to the Timbers or whatever, Galaxy, whoever they go to, instead of going out to dinner or going to a movie or going to a show. They're spending their money on that. And that's what's that base, right? That base of non-soccer people becoming fans has really what's changed the game. Because us crazies, to the day we die, we're always going to watch every game and go to every game we possibly can.
We'd be at that high school stadium with the field crowned at 60 yards because we've done it all of our lives.
Yes, exactly. But those people now that sit in the stands that don't have a kid playing, that had no relation to it, they're first generation soccer enthusiasts. Those are the people that have caused the numbers of the game and the sports centers of the world, the Fox Sports and all these, to put their money in the game. And those are the ones that have really made a huge difference.
It's critical. Growing the game, I think it's something that, we can all do better at, and we can all find new ways to do it. And you have a lot of different organizations who are involved in it in different ways. I mean, I worked for Soccer in the Streets for 10 years, and it was all about, creating new pathways to play for kids who didn't have access, whether where they lived or the cost, or they were in an area that didn't have a soccer culture, and you'd try to solve that. You've had the U.S. Soccer Foundation and all the work that they've done, and so many others. Tony Sane's foundation up in Minnesota does great work. JT Dorsey in Pennsylvania does great work. What are the areas for you, as you've seen this develop? You understand it as well as anybody in the country as to where it's come from, what that means, where it can go, where it is now. What do we need to do better in this country to grow the game on all fronts, in your opinion?
I'll start at the most obvious thing that everyone wants to talk about, and it's the technical side, right? It's the technical side. It's the technical side of the club, and it's not just, the head coach of the MLS team or the technical staff for the MLS teams. It is everybody, and people think I'm crazy, but the U.S., when we didn't win down in Trinidad and Tobago, because I've coached in Trinidad and Tobago, I have friends down there, I know it, and my comment was, you guys want to point the fingers at the Bradleys and all these people of the world. Yeah, we had enough. I know the players from Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, we had enough players to make a play and win that game. There's no question we had enough players. But to even be in that situation was caused by what happens at the grassroots level. The lack of teaching and coaching and the pay-to-play model kills us when we have to try to be elite. That is the killing factor of the game. So, and then I take it even deeper than that is, why do you think all the MLS clubs are so happy to have the TAM money? Because the reality is they don't want to take the time. Just the American player is not filling that need. So they're spending the money, that same money, on the same age of a player from another country, because the American player is not, the clubs, the MLS clubs don't feel that these players can feel the need that they need. So we got to grow the game at the grassroots level. The coaching's got to get better. The pay-to-play model's got to change. Nowhere in the world kids should be paying $10,000 to be playing soccer. No chance. Shouldn't be.
Nope.
Also with it is the cost of getting a coaching license prices so many people out of continuing their education. It's just, it's just too expensive. Yeah, U.S. Soccer is offering some free ones, grassroots, and some different things that are low cost. But if you really are interested in growing and they're putting stipulations on, you got to have this license to coach this and that, it's got to be inclusive. It can't be taking the money away. It can't be that money stopping people. There's so many youth clubs say we won't let money stop kids from playing, but that's not true, because They can't make it free for everybody because it's a business.
And that's the balance, and that's what I keep coming back to. And I'm with you on $10,000 to play as a kid. I couldn't have played. There's no way I would have played. There's a lot of kids who are talented players who would be, absolutely lost if that was the case across the board. And it's the case in far too many places. How do we change it? I mean, you, like you mentioned, being in Trinidad, you've seen a different culture of this, and you've been in Jamaica as well, where you don't have pay to play. Somebody's paying to develop players, to pay the coaches, to the training, all those things. How do we find a hybrid here? How do we find an American way of doing this?
And that's a great question, because that's one of my biggest concerns is that, because we're such an open country in the sense of lots of people from lots of countries come in and live, and they bring their way of thinking. And what you said, I love that, and I'm going to steal that. It needs to be a hybrid, because so many people who haven't grown up in the country, who come, after college or during college, they always say, this is the way we do it in our country. Mm-hmm. But it's not their country. So we need to find a way, like you said, to have that balance, that hybrid system. And I think one way to do that is we need to get the elite players with the elite players, and the elite players need to be in a free model. They need to be in a free model, because around the world, it is proven in Europe, it's proven in South America, it's proven anywhere you want to go, that if it's a free model for the best of the best will rise to the cream of the crop consistently. And what we have to be careful about, too, in our country is sometimes we over-focus on the outliers. And if you know anything about stats, anything about research, there's always outliers. That there's a late developer. There is something that happens that skews the model of what you're trying to create. But, and saying that you can't worry about that seems harsh. You have to understand that as a possibility. You have to have an eye looking for that. But I feel like in our country, we look for the outlier instead of for what's right in front of our face, that we need to build. Yeah, when we see a potential outlier, let's get that outlier into the group. And only you can get that outlier into the group if it doesn't cost any money. So I think scouting is so important. But again, I'm saying all these words generally. But the scouts have to know what they're looking for. They have to know what a good player is. They have to know what a quality player is. They have to, if they're looking at youth, can they look at the future and say, okay, I can see this player going here, but not just their opinion. It needs to be multiple people's opinion that agrees that these players can potentially reach that level. But what we have is we get a recommendation, and then we run with it because this particular person has a great track record per se. But no matter what, right? Because let's take it to the highest level. When I'm coaching at the professional level, I'm always asking my coaches, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What do you think? Is that right? Is this? Is that? But we don't necessarily do that at the lower levels. So I think if we let's take it to a club in Atlanta. And let's just say you're really trying to focus on elite. Now in Atlanta, you have the Club Champions League stuff now. You have ECNL, and and then you have DA situation, well, not DA, but whatever the new league is now, all these situations, and all of them saying they're elite. That's unrealistic. No country has that many elite players.
and why do they do that? To charge more money, right?
Money, yeah. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a system that funnels the best to the top. But at the bottom, this is not like rocket science. Everybody knows this. The base needs to be gigantic. Players need to fall in love with the game. And I phrase the game like this, right? There is the learn to love the game, and that's the first phase for me. So you learn to love the ball. You love the ball. You want the ball. You don't want anything. You don't want anything there is, but the ball. Number 2, you learn to train. You simply learn how to show up every day and train and hone your craft and hone your skill.
Such a key element.
And then the third phase is learning to win. And that's not till you are, winning is always in there, but it becomes more of a focus, that 16, 17, 18, when you got to win things, right? And then the final phase is maturing, where you create your own identity as a player. When I watch a maturing player, I say, oh, that's that player. He does this. She does that. This is what they do. They strike the ball like so. But we don't. We jump right into the learn to win phase at 10 and 11 years old. So that the lack of development is so skewed, it's unbelievable. So when they need to mature, there's too many things they've missed in order to mature. But to make sure that we have some kind of hybrid, we need a broad base. That broad base needs to funnel up, right? And that broad base needs to funnel up to a smaller base. And we just get just like the pyramid. We all see the pyramid all throughout. This is the pyramid, and that's the same thing in the development aspect of it. And and the only way we're going to do that is we got to figure out how the money is not the driving force behind it, and that's real important. But it's difficult because youth soccer is a billion-dollar industry, right?
Mm-hmm. How can we make the money work better? Is where I keep coming back to now. The more I think about it, because I mean, I get it from a youth club that's a business. I mean, you can portray it however you want, but a youth club is a business because if they don't have certain revenues, then they either don't pay for that education and development for their coaching staff or for their, all of their staff as a whole, or they don't offer as much, or they don't have as many teams. How can we change the mindset to where it's about development? And the way you describe it, it's not purely player development. It's more like a true youth development idea, because there is, character that has to be developed through this. There's maturity that is not necessarily just soccer related that has to be developed through this. It has to be holistic. If you're not looking at it that way and you're just being driven by the money, it's a disservice to the kids, ultimately.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it starts with leadership. I'm a huge proponent of leadership, because something I say all the time: bad leaders continue to hire bad leaders. Bad coaches continue to bring on bad coaches. And what's so important is that the coach, right? The coach needs to get out of their own way, because too many coaches at the youth level are working. Let's just throw acronyms out there. They're working in ODP. They're working in all these various things because their goal is, can they get to the top? So they've forgotten about the process, instead of saying, okay, my goal here is to get these players the best that they can. That's why I'm on the field, to get these players the best that they can be so they can move on and be better than I ever could have been in the game. But most of the coaches don't have that view. And I will sit in a room with 1,000 coaches and I'll say it to their faces, because I know I've been there, done it. I see it every single day, that too many times it's about the coach and it's not about the player. And it needs to be about the player. The player needs to be first. We need to see the player. We need to develop the player. As you use the term holistic, that's a very common term in use today. We need to develop the person, the player. We need to make sure they're educated, make sure they're real well-rounded, so that, and I like to always say this, if we do that job of development of the whole player, they might not be a pro, they might be a coach. They might not be a pro, they might be a referee. They might not be a pro, they may be an administrator. They might not be a pro, they may be an owner. So we create this opportunity for players beyond just the scope of being a pro player going to college. And it's just crazy, because the reality is we're selling so much at the youth level, selling a pipe dream. We're going to get your Division I college. If you get your Division I college scholarship. And the reality is there's not enough money at the Division I college level. Now with COVID, it's going to be even less money and potentially even less teams. Mm-hmm. So what you going to sell now? That's the question. What you going to sell now?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of the conversation we've had has been kind of in the soccer world that we knew before the middle of March. And it's going to look very different. We've talked about it on Soccer Down here a lot over the last few months. The financial realities that the professional game is going to face are very severe in this country. USL Championship, trying to figure out a way to get back on the field. Same for USL League One. You take a step beyond that, NISA, which was just getting started. What kind of a hit does this take? Then you get down to the youth side level, and you start to try to figure out the logistics, right, of how do you make this safe? How do you maintain safety and security for the kids, for the parents, for the coaches, for the referees, for anybody who's going to be involved? It's not going to be an easy process. And now you don't have the Development Academy as well, so that's changed everything alongside of it. It's almost time for a reset, though, in some ways, because things are going to look very different when we do find whatever this new normal is everybody keeps talking about. Whenever we find it, things are going to look so different. Maybe we can change some of these mindsets.
Yeah, I mean, look, and so if we talk about the COVID, my wife and I, we've been talking a lot about this. We've been blessed, right? Because she's a social worker, so she's considered a social, she's a case manager for foster kids. So, she's worked through the whole thing, and, my situation financially, we've been fine, right? And I just think about other people who haven't been fine, and my heart goes out to them, the ones that have been sick, the ones that have lost jobs. And, my hope has been, coming out of these last 3 months, if people would become introspective and say, how can we be together and not how we can be separate, not just as soccer, but as people, right? How can we be unified? Not that we believe the same and we act the same, but how can we be unified? How can we come together for the common good of human beings, not for the common good of Democrats or Republicans or independents or whatever? No, how can we become together as human beings for the betterment for the common good of people? And now if we take that to soccer, how can we do that? How can we come together, club in New York, club in Atlanta, club in LA, club in Albuquerque, club in the Midwest? How do we come together to unify for one purpose, to give the kids the best experience possible, to help them develop to the best level possible? And there's things I know right off the bat that we need to do. We need to reevaluate travel. Mm-hmm. We need to reevaluate, local leagues, where kids are traveling, an hour, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds are traveling an hour, 2 hours without traffic. I use that because Atlanta, obviously, right? Without traffic. Without traffic, it's taking them an hour to 2 hours to get to a game, to play a 60-minute game. Not right. Mm-mm. Not right. No. So, I lived in one state where directors, and I think some directors are close in Atlanta, making a couple $100,000 being a director of a youth club. But if you ask them to give up some of that salary so that the fees could go down, will they do that? I don't know. But I think we've got to reevaluate. Like I said, we've got to reevaluate the local leagues, the travel. We've got to reevaluate all these different leagues that call themselves elite. And people have to be okay with that. And the problem is egos. And the problem is that you've been selling a pipe dream for so many years. Now you got to figure out, what dream are you going to sell now? And these are questions that I ask myself, right? These not just I'm throwing it out there to people. These are questions I ask myself, and I think something that could change is because there's so many players now playing college, playing elite youth, playing high level youth that don't continue on in the game, professional players in MLS, USL, MLS. These players, male and female, need to also think about, how do I come back and give back to the game and be the coach of a U10 team, be the coach of a U12 team, where you're not saying you're giving a guy $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to coach 2 or 3 teams in a club.
It's fascinating when we start to really think about it, because alongside all of this, with the financial implications changing, you mentioned college programs. Some are not going to exist. Some are not going to play. Some are going to go on hiatus. Some are going to have to drop down levels. I mean, the elite level is going to have to change. There's so many things that are going to change. And one thing that has happened alongside of COVID-19 that makes me feel hopeful is that we are talking about change, and we're talking about change from being more inclusive and getting rid of some of these barriers that I think in the soccer world we've seen far too much in terms of not enough representation for everyone involved in the game. And I wanted to ask you, What can U.S. Soccer, what can MLS, what can USL, what can the leading organizations in the game do to, I think, respond? We've seen a lot of messages. We've seen a lot of statements made about Black Lives Matter, about, including more people in this game. What can we do past the words? What can we do to change that? And where should we start, in your opinion?
So if I look at the professional leagues, right? They've been hit super hard with COVID. I just remember when, I was actually literally, because I do some consulting for pro clubs around the world, help them set up their technical side of the club. And literally, just a few days before, the government closed the borders, I was on my way to Egypt to help a club in Egypt develop a technical plan from their first team all the way down to their academy level. Obviously they closed the border, so I didn't go. Something that I look at our leagues back at home is that, we're driven by sponsorship. We're driven by, the USL is driven by sponsorship, gate receipts, the things that a lot of other leagues don't necessarily they need, but it's not the integral part of what they are. And I think we have to look at, from all the leagues, they got to reevaluate business plans, reevaluate where the revenue streams are going to come from. When you start to reevaluate where the revenue streams and come from, you get into what you just mentioned about the lack of inclusiveness in the game. And a lot of times that is financial, right? That is financial. A lot of times racial issues are financial issues because, you look at the Black community, right? The Black community has a high poverty rate, has a high single mom rate. All these things are tied to lack of finances. So we need to, as a country, we need to evaluate those things, right? We need to evaluate those things. Why is there this inequality in the finances? I don't have the answers. I'm not in politics. I don't have any interest in politics. I'm just asking the question. But in terms of how do we be more inclusive, right? How do we be more inclusive? And again, what is if you go from the professional level down, it is finances are a barrier, right? And what do I mean by barrier? You take a team of 25 guys. The highest paid player typically has the biggest voice, right? Mm-hmm. But what does that player do with the biggest voice? Do they use it for change, or they use it to benefit themselves? I don't know. It's just a rhetorical question that I ask. But U.S. Soccer, right? If we start from the top down, U.S. Soccer's got to get themselves together first, right? They got to get themselves together because there's nowhere in the world that the makeup of the board is the way it should be. There's nowhere in the world that there are not any decision makers that are not of the majority race, not in U.S. Soccer making decisions. MLS clubs. Where are the Black presidents, technical directors, head coaches? USL, I asked the same question. Where are they? I've lived it. I've worked it. There were years where I was the only Black coach in the USL. There were years. I was the only one. And there is just no way that should be. Because if you look at the number of Black kids playing the game, I mean, obviously Atlanta's unique because it's such a huge Black population in Atlanta that when you walk on the fields, right? Because when I grew up, I mean, I can't remember the first time I played with a Black kid, right? But now almost every team you go to in any pocket of any part of, the metro area, there are Black kids on every team. And over the course of time, they stay in it, right? And they continue on and they move forward and they go to college and they get an education and they become pros, but they're not allowed a chance to be decision makers in these clubs. And until that happens, we're just going to be talk. We're just going to be talk. And I use it as such, right? My mom and dad are 75 and they both live in Atlanta still. And I used to say, it's going to sound bad though, but I used to say, well, when my parents' generation dies off, the race relations will be better. They're 75, and they ain't better.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I remember growing up, I said, well, the 80s will be better than the 70s, and the 90s will be better than the 80s, and the 2000s. It's not better. It's not better. But why is it not better? Because as a country, we're driven by money. And it's like, let me phrase, let's go back to sport, right? You could be on a bad team with a lot of issues, but if you win games, all those things are swept under the rug until the end of the season. Everybody's peeved and the team leaves or whatever, right? It's the same thing in our country. When the economics of our country are good, and a lot of people feel they're making money and they have a chance to reach a level that's higher than they were, but not necessarily at the elite level to get into that president role, that ownership role, they begin. But when the finances don't look well, or what's happening today where the skewedness of the brutality of police officers that we see on black men, then we get riled up. But we should always be looking at these issues. We don't always look at these issues. We don't look at these issues when it's extreme, and we don't look at these issues when the money's good in our country or in the game. And now we're looking at these issues. And hopefully we'll continue to look at these issues, but we need to put things in place to make a difference. Because we can talk all we want to. We can talk all we want to, but we need action. We need action.
Yeah,
but then I asked the question.
It's not easy. It's not easy to solve it. When I think to it, you said something that stuck with me. I remember 2014. It was right after Atlanta United, or at least MLS, was announced as coming to Atlanta. And one of the first projects that we did at Soccer in the Streets with the organization was to start a program in Castleberry Hill, Vine City, for a soccer league at the John Hope Community Center. And we didn't have the funds straight away to hire a bunch of coaches and come in and do it. So this is how we did programs. A lot of times it'd start from, one of us in leadership going out and coaching and doing the program. That was what we had to do. So I went over there for their summer camp, and that was when we were first going to do soccer sessions during their summer camp. They have a great STEM program, and they have kids doing robotics and lots of great stuff. This was the first time they were going to have an athletic component and have soccer in it. One Latino kid in the group. All the other kids were black, and the only kid who had ever played soccer before was the Latino kid. So when we start doing little games, he's doing really well. He's picking everything up fast and kind of dominating the play, and kids were getting frustrated. And one of the kids, I just met him. I just the first time I'm there. One of the kids pulls me aside and says, "Why are we doing this?" And I'm like, "What? We're playing soccer." Da, da, da. It was the World Cup was just starting and all that stuff. And he's like, "No, don't you know that black kids don't play soccer?" Huh. One of the first things he said to me, and I'm like, "Wow!" And that really it hit me in that. Okay. How can I show him that's not true, first off, because he doesn't know that happens. And I was thinking, like, the whole rest of the session, I'm sitting there, like, thinking in the back of my mind, like, okay, how do I break through this and try to change this approach a little bit? And I thought about, I think it was a few days either before the U.S. game in the World Cup or after, and I pulled up a team picture, and one of the first people I pointed it to was Jozy Altidore. And said, okay, this is the U.S. national team. We talked about the World Cup. You've heard of the World Cup. Here, this is happening. And what's so funny is he ended up being the kid who stood out more than anybody else the whole rest of the summer. And when we started putting teams together, he was the captain. He was the organizer. He was helping pick everything up at the end of sessions, helping set everything up. He was the most passionate one, but that was what he thought at the very beginning, because in his community there was no soccer, didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, even me growing up, right? Even growing up, I mean, in the black community, and I mean, again, I would have people ask me, "Why do you play soccer?" And I just like playing soccer. I would have people ask me that, or even some some white kids, they would say, why do you play? You should be playing basketball. You should be playing football. I'm like, I don't like those. I like soccer. So I know where the kid's coming from, right? I know where he's coming from, but when you love something, you love something, and that's what it is,
It's that question of access and opportunity. And, when we start getting into that next step of, okay, we're talking, which is good, and we're identifying problems, and that's good. But like you said, we can talk and nothing changes. It's what do we do? I keep coming back to access, and I keep coming back to opportunity, and there are still lots of places in Atlanta and in pretty much every city, I would imagine, that kids don't have an opportunity to play, have had no, experience with it, or they've had a chance to play, but there's a roadblock put in front of them. And you mentioned money, and that's always one that comes up. How do we bridge that gap? How do we create more opportunity? This is something I feel like state associations and the U.S. Soccer Federation have to get involved in solving. It's the only way it's going to change on any kind of broad scale.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. I mean, access, and I love the way you term that, right? Access. And one thing I want to be clear about, though, is that it's important that we're talking about the Black plight and the Black community's difficult situation that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. But when we talk about access in soccer, you also have to look at the Latino community. You also have to look 100%. At the rural community where there are, white kids that don't have access, because they live so far out in the country, right? When you talk about access has got to be to everybody. Access is just not one community. Access is everybody, because the teams and the game grows, and you have a better chance of competing, which U.S. Soccer wants to compete at the elite level, which is, CONCACAF championships, World Cups, these things. You need all those different types of people involved in the game, because all their perspectives are different and all how they play is different. So if we can have access to all these players from everywhere, have access, and then if we have access, we can also have access to potential coaches, potential administrators, and then the one or two or three that are at the best, cream comes to the top because they've created access, and we keep creating these pathways, and we keep showing doors open, not closed. And then when they get on to high school and they play, at a high school level, and the door continues to open, now they get a chance to go to college and the door remains open. And now they become a pro player, and then they become a professional coach. Access will change things. But if you put roadblocks, there's nothing wrong with hurdles. Hurdles help us develop as people. But when you think of a roadblock, I think of my travels around the world, I think of a roadblock, I see a barrier with armed guards there, meaning I'm not going by. That's what I think of a roadblock, right? That's how I see a roadblock. And there's a difference having hurdles and having roadblocks. Hurdles grow us as people. Barriers make us turn around and not want to try. And I think you're spot on about access.
The turning around and not wanting to try, I think that's been a problem for American soccer, and in a lot of levels of it. I've been through that in my life when I was a kid playing, when I was working in the game, where things would happen that felt like a roadblock. You turn away and you leave, and we've had too much of that. And we have to find ways to keep not just bringing people back, but not having them turn away in the first place. And I'm glad you mentioned all aspects of that, because it's something that I'm seeing here in Georgia over the last few years, and there's an effect from Atlanta United, because now you have that big team to aspire to. Now if you're a kid growing up, you want to wear that jersey, you want to play in that stadium, you want to play for that team, you want to lift a trophy. But you think of kids that I had the opportunity to coach with soccer in the streets who were invited to play with top teams, and they would have had a scholarship and all that's great, and they wouldn't have had to pay, or they would have had to pay very little, and that solves part of the problem. But they lived on one side of town, the club was on another side of town. The parents both worked. There wasn't anybody to take them to training, so they couldn't join that club, and they didn't get that opportunity. And when they would get a chance to play at a high level, they'd show out. They showed out at the Disney tournament. They showed out at whatever showcase they could find, but there was always a roadblock somewhere there. Or I think about calling the Georgia High School State Championships last year, and a girl in Vidalia in South Georgia, state record, 90 goals last season.
Wow.
In high school. It's like 5 or 6 a game. It's insane. But she's in Vidalia. There's no elite coaching, no elite level. There's no access for her.
No.
And that's a shame, because I don't think there's anything in the water in Vidalia that makes it different, that a player can't be a professional, can't be one of the best, just because they were born in an area that doesn't have the access.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you use Atlanta United, but the big teams, the professional clubs, everywhere else in the world, they're the difference makers. They're the difference makers in the games in their countries. And fair enough, countries are different. Countries are smaller. Countries have much more history in the game than we do. We have different problems and different things, worrying about making sure our MLS clubs are stable and yada, 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 and our USL teams are stable and can continue on for another year. Most of the countries don't have those sort of, unless you get into the smaller developing countries, but in the developed countries, you have, you don't have that worry. But that can't be a worry to deter these professional clubs to be difference makers. And what I've always said, whenever I'm coaching at a professional club, I want to make sure our club, it's not just seen as part of the community, but we are the community, that we are making a difference in our community. Even when I was in Sacramento, right, in 2014, we won the USL championship. I was assistant head coach with Preki, and then I took over the academy. So I was also running the academy. And one of the first things I said in public, I said, I'm going to make sure our coaching staff and our players look like our city. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to pick kids just because they fit the mold. The best kids need to play. But my focus was making sure our coaches look like our city. The ethnicity of the city, the players, ethnicity of the city. This was going to be one group. It was going to be the best of those groups that we could if it was available. But my mindset is inclusiveness, create the opportunity. And it was different in Sacramento. It was a free academy. I mean, our first tryout, we had 700 kids at our first tryout.
Wow.
So, yeah. But, it was a fully funded program, right? From everything, even when we went over to the Bay Area and played San Jose, we took the kids, parents dropped them off, we drove them over in a van. We got them lunch. We brought them back. We dropped them off. They didn't drop a dime unless they wanted to. But that's what it takes, right? That's the commitment it's going to take, and I believe owners, I believe club presidents, I believe head coaches all have a part to play in that. They all have a part to play in that. And whenever I'm at that level, I always want to have a part to play in that. It's not just about that little bit. And I think everyone's got to have that same sort of mindset.
It's critical, and at a time where you look at cuts because of the financials, especially after COVID-19. I know it's been a big fear on the women's side as the women's game has grown dramatically in recent years, and we're seeing in England, for example, the FA didn't want to put the money towards finishing the Women's Super League season, but meanwhile you have League Two and League One having their playoffs and finding money for them to be able to do the testing because it's expensive to be able to do this safely. The community programs, the elimination of those roadblocks that it feels like maybe in the last 5 years, American soccer has at least had a recognition of and started to remove some. Now it's going to be harder because there's going to be less money to work with. And you're right. It's going to take the people in the big roles, whether it's the federation, the state association, the big pro teams, to fight for it because it's vital or the game doesn't grow.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Look, my personal mission statement about life and about the game is, impact culture and change lives. Use the game to connect with people. Use the game to impact culture and change lives. And if you're going to impact culture and change lives, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I know that people will say, well, if you're a professional coach coaching Atlanta United, how can you do that? You have no choice. For me, people are going to say, well, you got to worry about your job. You got to worry about winning games. You know what? You do. But you got to make sure that that you don't forget about those things. You don't forget about the impact in culture and changing lives. And that's what the game can do. For me, there's only a few things in life that are unifiers. Sitting down at a good meal, music, and the game of soccer. Those are things that unify people and unify communities.
I hope we can keep getting back on the field here soon with MLS, with USL, with national teams, and unify communities through the game. Because I'm with you. It's one of those special things at a match when we're at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to look out into the crowd from the radio booth and to see Atlanta, all of Atlanta, every aspect of Atlanta. It's the most diverse place in the city for an Atlanta United match, and it's an amazing experience. And man, we're missing that. We need it right now. Yeah, we are missing that for sure. I mean, we're definitely missing that. I mean, the game is wonderful. The game is sport in general is so important to our country. I mean, it is a release. It is an opportunity to provide people with such great freedom to meet other people, such great freedom to express their emotions and their passions for their team and for their city, and just hope we can get back to some kind of normalcy, right? But I will say this: I hope we don't go back to what we considered normal, where we were isolated and we were worried about ourselves and we were worried about our team. But we want to worry about our community. We want to worry about our country. We want to worry about other people's teams. Not saying that when we get on the field at the pro level, we don't want to crush the other team and win the championship. No, of course.
I'm not saying that at all, because we might as well not play then, right? But what I am saying is, can we have a little tweak in our perspective that, we are really in it together, right? We're in it together, and I don't want to see this downtime of the last 3 months. I don't want to see what's happening in the movement with Black Lives Matter, that we become fractured again. Because that is my concern, because we as an American people, we're good at that. We're good at coming to a crescendo and all the voices going in one direction, and then we just sort of slowly ebb away from that same direction, and then we're back in a place where none of us will like, and then we have to do this all over again.
It's so funny. I hated the term "the new normal" when we were talking strictly about the COVID-19 outbreak and getting back to the new normal, and everybody kept throwing that word around, and I hated it at the time. Now I hope it actually is a reality, that it's not a new normal because of dealing with a virus that we've never seen before. It's a new normal because of the way we look at society and the way we look at community and what that means. And maybe it can have a much better meaning than we thought it did when we were just talking about a virus. I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, I'm excited though. I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited that the game's growing. I'm excited that USL is still, even through COVID, still talking about expansion teams. Even, NISA is still talking about expansion teams, and those things are important. MLS has got a roster of of expansion teams coming in the next couple of years, and that's just like important for the game, and it's important for life, and it's important that we embrace that and we use it in the right way.
Here's what I'm hoping. Next time we chat, it's going to be about tactics. It's going to be about these players that are standing out, about this game was amazing. I hope that's where we are soon, and we have that chat soon. But, Rod, thanks for the time. I really, really appreciate your time today.
All right. I really appreciate you, man. Keep doing a good job.